About 7 years ago, when I was 17, my parents went out of town for a weekend and left me at home. This was a pretty common occurrence. My parents trusted me. I would usually spend these weekends away staying with friends or family, as my parents' house is a bit creepy to be in alone, even during the day. We live in a small rural town where everyone knows each other, and generally it's pretty quiet and safe. Saturday, I was supposed to stay with a friend, but her parents decided at the last minute not to let me stay. It wasn't a big deal that I had to leave. I was somewhat prepared to have to go home because her parents got weird about company sometimes. I left her house, which is about 15 minutes from my parents' house, around 9:30 or 9:45. While I was on the way home, I got a weird feeling that I can't really explain. I just knew that I didn't want to go stay at my parents' alone. I called my brother and asked if I could stay with him. At the time, he was living with a woman who had a small child. He told me it would be quieter and easier for him to just come stay with me, since his dog would bark if I tried to come in the house. He said he would be at our parents' in 20 minutes. After hanging up, I decided to stop at a gas station and grab a snack before going home so that my brother would be there when I got there. I pulled into the gas station. There were only a few cars in the lot, which is typical because this is a small town in the rural South where everything pretty much stops after 8 p.m. I parked and walked up to the door. There was a man standing outside the door smoking. He opened the door for me without saying anything. This is normal Southern hospitality, especially since I'm female. I smiled and thanked him. Inside, there was another man standing by the door. I noticed him staring at me as soon as I came in. He gave me that gross up and down look and said something to the effect of, "Hey sexy, what are you doing alone?" Creepy as fuck. I just ignored him and walked towards the back of the store. He yelled after me and called me a bitch. I still ignored him. I figured he was drunk or high or just an asshole. Most people around here talk a big game but rarely back it up. I wasn't scared, just annoyed. I got my snacks and paid at the counter. When I walked back up to the door, both the men were gone. I was happy to not have to deal with any more catcalling. I began walking across the lot towards my car, which was probably about 100 feet away from the door. As I was walking, I looked down at my phone to see if enough time had passed for my brother to be at my parents'. When I looked up, the asshole who had hit on me was standing at the pump staring. I looked at him for a second and continued walking. "Hey, you know you're supposed to answer a man when he speaks to you," he said. I remember saying something snarky back to him and getting in my car. He looked pissed at my sarcasm. I locked my doors as soon as I was in my car, started it, and was thinking of nothing but getting home to eat my snacks and hang out with my brother. I put my car in gear and realized the man had disappeared. I looked around before pulling out of my parking spot only to realize that both men were sitting in a car facing mine across the lot. They were both staring at me and talking, occasionally even pointing toward me. I just stared at them, defiant and pissed. I didn't want them to think they scared me at all. While we were sitting having our staring contest, the man who had opened the door for me smiled and gave me the finger across the throat gesture, as in "you're dead." I rolled my eyes and pulled out of the gas station, annoyed. To my dismay, they pulled out behind me. I hadn't been scared up until this point because, as I said, most people here are a lot of talk with no follow-through. Instead of going home, I took a few back roads that connect back in a sort of circle to see if they were really following me, which of course they were. When they realized I was testing them, they drove up really close to me and started laying on the horn. I couldn't see their headlights, they were so close. I called my brother and told him what was going on. He told me to come home, and he would handle it. I started driving home. The two assholes were still on my ass blowing the horn. Even with my detours, I was only about 3 minutes from my parents' house. I slowed down to pull in the driveway and was immediately relieved. At the end of the driveway, my brother was standing shirtless, with his shoulders back, hands crossed in front of his stomach, clearly holding a pistol, his intimidating-looking pit bull sitting by his side. I drove around him into the yard. The two guys actually started to pull in behind me until they saw my brother, then they hightailed it out of there. I have no idea what they would have done if I had stopped somewhere alone or kept driving. I always think fondly of that image of him standing there like a badass, ready to protect me. I'm thankful he was there. I work at a gas station off of a highway. I usually work short shifts because I'm in college. I've only closed twice because I don't work the late shift, but I was covering for someone tonight. I was alone after 5 p.m. because my manager left and the garage closed. It was pretty boring tonight besides the few conversationalists who came in and one guy who got surprisingly angry when I wouldn't give him my number. I'm wondering if he tried to get revenge tonight. At around 9:30 p.m. I noticed a car just sitting at the gas pump furthest away from the store. They weren't pumping gas and their car was still running. After a little while I shut the outside lights off because it was near to closing time and I wanted them to leave. But they stayed there. I called my boyfriend because I felt uneasy. I wanted him to tell me I was being paranoid. I hoped they were just some kids smoking weed in their car or something. He kept me company on the phone as I counted the drawer. After I finished counting, I closed everything up and went to the back to put my paperwork away. In the back, I checked the cameras. Looking at the cameras, I could see the just corner of their car. It was as if they were strategically parked where I couldn't see their license plate. But I could still see they were out there. Meaning they stayed there for over a half hour in complete darkness. I told my boyfriend I was getting freaked out and he told me just hurry up and get home and everything would be okay. Now, at my gas station, I have to lock the front door from the outside. Meaning I would have to stand in perfect view of the car with my back turned. This scared me, but I knew I had to do it if I wanted to leave. I have pepper spray, so I made sure I carried in my hand just in case, and I went outside and tried locking the door as quickly as possible. I still hoped I was being paranoid. As my back was turned while I locked the door, I heard a car door close behind me, and I felt my heart drop. It was like my worst fear came true. My hands began to shake as I fumbled with the lock. I was so scared he was coming up behind me. When I finally locked, it felt like forever, but it was probably only a few seconds. I yanked my key out of the door and speed walked to my car. I still wanted to seem unbothered, praying this wasn't what I thought it was. Once I got in, I locked my car door and looked out the window. I saw a man in a baseball hat walking around in the dark. I was still on the phone with my boyfriend and I started freaking out, saying things like, oh my God, he got out of his car, what do I do? My boyfriend told me to get out of there as fast as possible and I did just that. But as I started to back out to the parking spot, I saw the man get back in his car. As I started to drive away, the man in the car started to leave too. I knew this wasn't a coincidence. When I pulled out of our parking lot, I pulled out right in front of someone, probably scared them half to death, but I wanted to put a car in between me and the man. To my horror, the car ended up turning and my pursuer sped up to be right behind me. I couldn't doubt myself anymore. I knew this guy was following me. When I think back to it now, he wasn't being very subtle at all. I knew I couldn't go home because I did not want this creep knowing where I lived. At this point, my mom and my boyfriend were both on the phone and they told me to drive to the police station. I did just that. The man followed me all the way there. Once the police station turned into view though, the man's car sped up and flew past me. I have never felt so relieved in my life. I drove home as fast as possible, literally shaking as I began to process what just happened. I'd never been followed like that before. I couldn't help but think what could have happened if I took a few seconds longer to lock the door. Or even worse, if I went up to the car to ask them to leave before I closed. Once I got home, my little brother offered to give me one of his pocket knives. His sweetness made me feel better. I'm definitely going to call my manager in the morning to check the security footage. When I was younger, every year for Christmas I would drive upstate to my aunt's house along a stretch of highway. I cannot for the life of me remember the name of this road. All I know is it runs nearby Akron, New York. At some point, however, most of the drive is through rural areas with little to no towns nearby. So it was the dead of night and my groggy self had gotten off a long shift and had to drag my ass to my aunt's house since my extended family was expecting me the following morning. Near halfway through the drive, I realized I was low on gas, which irritated me. My brother told me he had filled it up the day before, so he either forgot or was straight lying. I saw an archaic-looking sign for a gas station off the next road. It wasn't an official road sign, literally a pole with a slab of metal attached with gas off next exit or something along those lines painted on. That seemed a little sketchy, but people do the same thing with fruit stands on highways, so whatever. I pulled off the next exit on some dilapidated country-ass road through dense woods. The whole thing was creepy and surreal. I kept expecting Leatherface to come running out of the trees with a chainsaw. Anyways, eventually I came to the gas station and realized quickly it hadn't been open for years. It was all rusted and the convenience store's roof was caving in. The gas pumps had all been taken out as well. I pulled over next to it and checked my gauge. I would probably only make it another half mile before running out, so I called AAA and they said they'd send a truck over. Now I played the waiting game. I left my engine on because when the headlights were off everything was pitch black and my paranoid self wasn't sitting next to an abandoned gas station in the middle of a forest in complete darkness. So most of the wait went uneventful until I sensed movement around the side of the old store where my lights are pointed. I look up but didn't see anything more, so I look back down at my phone. Then over the sounds of the night, I hear someone yell, "Hey buddy. Come here," in a demanding tone. I look up and I shit you not, there's a dude standing by the old store, looking towards me, illuminated by my headlights. He looked like a run-of-the-mill homeless guy. I was honestly spooked and figured he must have been squatting there. Still watching him, I rolled down my window and yelled something like, "Yeah, what's up?" Still mentally crapping myself. I had my foot ready to floor it out of there at the first sign of trouble. "You got any change?" "Nah, I don't, sorry man." I look up at him. He has this kind of vacant expression and is standing stiff. Then I see more movement. There are heads. About 20 or so heads, peeking around trees beyond the man I'm talking to. I can't see them clearly at all, but they are definitely people. Literally just heads, staring in my directions from around the trees. I see another guy beginning to walk from around the gas station, and then I turned around and sped off. I got as far away from that place as my tank could carry me and updated AAA on my location. The driver came back over and filled me up, and I didn't say anything. But after he left, I wanted to call the cops, so I called the nearest town's sheriff department. They said they'd send a trooper over and I gave them the location. When I got to my aunt's house, they called me back and said whoever was there was gone, but they could tell a large number of people had been living there for a while. Blankets, canned food, the usual. The whole situation still freaks me out, but frankly I can consider myself lucky I'll always have such a creepy story to tell. I'm just glad nothing bad happened.